Hi, everyone. I'm Charlton Singleton, the artist in residence here at the Gilliard Center. Today, we welcome Dr. Karen Chandler, a good friend of mine and a person that has been in the arts community here in the Low Country of Charleston, South Carolina for many years. She has done so many different things to enhance the community and all of the youngsters like myself and people that are involved in a lot of the arts management and artsy things, if you will, in the city of Charleston. They probably have had some definite influence from Karen Chandler. And so today we'd like to just talk to her about all things Karen and catch up on some things and talk about the climate of the arts community here in the city of Charleston. So welcome, Karen. Thank you for being here with us today.
Great. Thank you for having me, Charlton. It's my pleasure.
So now, right before we got on here, you were telling me about how you've been here in Charleston for 21 years?
21 years. That's right. I moved here July 99 from the DC area. I was teaching at the time, teaching arts management at American University, and got the position here as actually co-director of the arts management program. And so I moved here to do that. I was actually directing the program with a really wonderful young visionary, Stacy Shaw. And so we directed that program for several years, and Marvin Delaney, who was at the time the executive director at Avery Research Center, and then later, chair of the history department at the college, asked me to come to Avery. So I spent 3 years at Avery, and we'll probably talk about the pivot and what magic happened at Avery.
Right. So now you just said that you were in DC. Let's start back at the beginning.
Okay.
Where did you grow up? What city did you grow up in?
I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. That's my home. And studied piano from age 7. Took piano lessons, from Sarah Wesley Phillips. I call her full name. She just passed away several months ago, but was like a second mom to me. Her entire family was like another family of ours. So she wasn't just my piano teacher, but she was a real special person. And that's probably like a lot of us who grew up in communities where we were taught by someone who was close to the family and the community.
Definitely.
But anyway, so I took piano lessons. So I trained classically, but because Mrs. Phillips was an alum of Fisk University, and because I grew up in Nashville, I knew all things Fisk, all things Fisk Jubilee Singers, all things John Work. So I was exposed to some of the classical music, organ, keyboard music, particularly, and choral music of John Work. And so I was really fascinated with the sort of the musical nuances of African-American classical music. And so anyway, that interested me. So I performed a lot of John Work's piano composition.
So were you striving to be a concert pianist?
No, I always, very interestingly, I always had an interest in teaching.
Wow.
And I'd come home from school, when I was 7 or 8, and I'd line my dolls up in the living room, right next to the sofa. Sometimes they were in the middle of the walkway, so people had to walk around the dolls. But I would always put a book in their hand. I didn't always have music theory books, but I was always teaching them theory. So I just loved teaching.
I see.
I was pretty good as a pianist, but not great. I knew how to stay in my lane.
Okay.
So, but it was teaching that was really inspiring to me at a very, very early age. My mom was a teacher administrator, but in dental hygiene. So not in the arts. So I grew up around, she was at Meharry Medical College. She was the director of the division of dental hygiene there for years. So I grew up on that campus, which was across the street from Fisk University. So the campus environment was very, very familiar to me, and all things Fisk and the arts and music, particularly choral music and keyboard music.
So now I've got to ask, because there are a number of HBCUs in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
How did you escape those HBCUs in Nashville and come out to the East?
It's very simple. My mom and daddy went to Hampton.
Oh, yeah, of course.
My mother and father went to Hampton, and my grandmother was reference librarian for at Hampton for many, 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 many years.
Wow, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so my grandmother, mom's mom, was actually in Hampton. So we visited as kids the Hampton Newport News area, very often. So once or twice a year, I was even on Hampton's campus, but it was that. I had a full scholarship to Fisk, could have stayed. A lot of my friends stayed and childhood friends stayed and went to Fisk or Tennessee State.
Right.
But I was, me and my brother actually were one of very few who, at that time, who left and went to Hampton. Now there are a great number of alumni.
So you go to Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
You majored in
music education.
Music education.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of my family members went to Hampton, and he talks about it. He's about 4 years older than I am. He's in his early 50s now. He talked very highly of Hampton and everything. And I personally have a love for Hampton because I met the Count Basie Orchestra, or a lot of the members, at a competition that was going on at Hampton at the time. It was like the Hampton University Count Basie sort of competition, jazz competition for middle and high school and college bands or whatever have you. And Hampton has always had some very well-known professors there, like Professor Gardner.
Yes. Effie Gardner.
And I was talking the other day with a good friend of mine, and we got on the subject of choral music, and we were talking about Roland Carter. Roland Carter. Yeah.
Marvin Carter. Yeah.
So now you were able to study under Roland Carter a little bit?
Oh, yes.
So for those of you that do not know about Roland Carter, can you tell everybody a little bit about Roland Carter and
wow. Okay.
And just the whole thing, Roland Carter. Give him a little bit of Roland Carter, just a little bit.
Roland Marvin Carter. My goodness, probably I would say among the top maybe 5 choral music conductors, particularly at HBCUs, but I would list him among some of the top choral conductors of all time in colleges and universities. We went to, when I was, I think, a sophomore. This is so funny because I was just talking with Roland a couple of weeks ago. And we were remembering our trip to Carnegie Hall, and he was trying to remember which choir I was in. I said, I think that was 1976, 75 or 76, when we were at Carnegie Hall with Morgan State's choir. And I think it was Nathan Carter, I believe is his name. So the two Carters were, and two great choral conductors were there together. But I mean, I was at Carnegie Hall when I was 20 years old.
Wow.
We went to Interlochen and did their summer music festival. I think that might have been my junior year. But Roland Carter was connected, obviously, to the arts and to arts institutions and folk all over for many, many years, and exposed us. So not only was Carnegie Hall an experience for me as a young music student studying under Roland and so many others, but Interlochen, we were everywhere. Mercer Ellington's band, the Duke Ellington band came, and we performed. We did the what's the Sacred Suite?
The Sacred Concerts.
The Sacred Concerts.
Yes.
Yep, performed that with them. So so Roland was. He was my teacher at Hampton, and so I think then we sort of understood and knew his brilliance because we saw it every day in Clark Hall at 6 o'clock, when we had choir rehearsal. And so I knew that there was something magical about him and a brilliance that I had not ever been exposed to with someone of his caliber, of his musical intellect and caliber. So I think we all knew that was a special time for us, but it wasn't until much, much, much later, in my career when I'd bump into somebody, whether they were in the States or, out of the country. And whenever I mentioned Hampton, they'd say, "Oh, did you know Roland Carter?"
Like I just did.
Yeah. And people from all walks of life, particularly those who are in music. Mm-hmm. So Roland is an arranger, composer. He's probably best known for his arrangement of Lift Every Voice and Sing. Mm-hmm. And so I hope, I know that I think Lee Pringle had one of his choirs perform it, and Roland came in as guest conductor. But boy, would I just love to see a full orchestra and Roland conducting Lift Every Voice and Sing. It is a brilliant, magnificent arrangement.
Excuse me for a second.
Write that down. Note number 15.
Yeah, got it. All right.
Seriously, it is. It's a wondrous composition. So Roland is. He was always Mr. Carter to me, and it took me a long time to call him Roland. Greer Wilson, who was the director of student activities at Hampton when I was a student, she and I became good friends later on. We both were at University of Virginia together, and she and Roland were very good friends. So the two of them sort of adopted, this little kid, Karen Chandler, as sort of one of their friends. So I was able then to be able to call Roland Carter or Mr. Carter. Right. So it's relevant now to me.
So now you're at Hampton, you finish and you have this music education degree.
Yep.
Did you immediately go into teaching?
No, immediately I went to New York City to go to grad school because I did my student teaching, of course, my senior year.
Okay.
And I think I did middle and high school. And I said, nope.
Yeah, that's a different beast.
Not interested. I need to teach adults. Mm-hmm. So I, and I take my hat off to the amazing, amazing teachers who teach on the secondary level. But I just, my interest really was on the college level. And remember, I grew up on a college campus. So
makes sense.
There was a lot of familiarity for me for colleges. So I literally left Hampton. I applied to both Yale and to Columbia University Teachers College. I got a full scholarship to Yale, but not to Columbia. But I wanted to study at Columbia because Robert Pace, whose piano method I had studied as a kid, was professor of piano there
Ace
and
Method,
piano pedagogy.
Right. Yeah.
So I was like, that's where I need to go. So of course it took a little, convincing my parents with the full scholarship to Yale that I wasn't going to take the full scholarship to Yale, but I was going to go to Columbia, and I did, and I was again just amazed at being taught by, just like Roland, being taught by someone in the music education business who I'd known because I'd studied this method for so many years. So there I was in 1979, straight out of Hampton.
With having, in the music world, I mean, they are household names.
Yes.
To be to have that as, have them as your professors, and learn right from them, straight.
Yeah, well, he was Robert Pace, but I called him Bob. Oh. He was Bob Pace. So it was really cool to be able to have that experience. And they knew, Bob Pace and a lot of the other teachers professors at Columbia knew Roland and knew Hampton and knew the music enterprise that I was coming from.
That's right. Yeah. Had a good reputation.
Very good reputation.
Solid.
Yep.
Solid.
Absolutely.
So you go up to Columbia.
Yeah.
You get that degree.
Yep.
What's your next move?
So my dad knew Jimmy Russell, Dr. James Russell to me at the time, who was the president of St. Paul's College in Lawrenceville, Virginia, which is about maybe, I think, 30 miles outside of Petersburg.
Okay.
A little rural community. And, but also a very strong reputation back in the day as an HBCU, Episcopal related.
Right.
And so anyway, mom and dad talked to Jimmy Russell and, it's like, and I think he finished Hampton. I think Dr. Russell finished Hampton. Anyway, he hired me. I remember my salary in so this is 1979, 80. It was $14,000 a year. Yes, $14,000 a year.
That's right.
So
you were going to the Sizzler every night.
There you go. And there was a Sizzler around the corner.
Yes.
So I went there as the as the, what did they call me? I think coordinator of music, because there was no degree program in music there. So I was all things music. So here we go. I taught piano. I taught organ. I even taught for a semester trombone lessons.
Whoa.
Wait a minute.
As long as I've known you, you have never mentioned anything about playing any brass instrument or what?
And never ever will after that. French horn too. I think I had a French horn student. I did play the French horn for like a minute, but it was just too hard. I couldn't blow.
Okay.
But anyway, I taught trombone and French horn for like a minute.
Okay.
Not my thing, but I did it. Because at Hampton, you learned everything.
Right. That's, yeah.
So I had the choir. I had the college choir. I had the chapel choir. Remember, it's Episcopal related. So now I have a whole set of duties as the coordinator of music for the chapel. And so there are midweek services for the chapel. So I was also the organist for the chapel. I had a community choir for the chapel for Sunday mornings. I think the students sang on Wednesdays. I taught music to elementary and secondary education majors who needed music appreciation, for their programs of study. Yep.
How many hours in the day did you have with all?
A lot. That's why I only stayed 3 years. It was a lot. But you know what happened, and what's so important about those 3 years that I spent, and actually those 3 years, I say 3 years and I did all this work. I was kind of wiped out after I left, for sure. It was a lot of work. But Dr. Russell called me into his office, I think right after my first year. He says, no, I would like you to take Robert Merrill's place. Robert was the chair of the artist recital series of the college, and I'd like you to run it. And I said, okay, that sounds good with all the other many things I have to do. Mm-hmm. And of course, that was not a paid position. It was just,
you do
something else. And so I said, well, that sounds good. I really would like the opportunity to plan some of these arts events, to host them for the campus and the community, in a rural community, a very small community like Lawrenceville. The college obviously was the cultural center of the community. So I said, sure, I'll do it. I said, what's my budget? What kind of money do I have to work with? And he says, I'm sorry, there's no budget. You'll need to raise the money. And so I didn't want to say, I don't know how to fundraise.
Right.
But I said, okay, I can figure that out. I mean, we did little, fundraisers for the choir. I could figure that out. And so I took that on, 4 events a year. So the first event I brought Dexter Gordon.
Whoa. Your first event is Dexter Gordon.
Is Dexter Gordon in the Chicago auditorium, which I had to really renovate because it was like a big old gymnasium, and we didn't completely renovate it, but acoustically I had to, get it in shape. Dexter Gordon was my first concert for the Artist Recital Series at St. Paul's College.
And what year is this?
This is, let's see, I got there in 79, 80. So this is probably 81.
Wow. This is like right at that time where, a lot of people, a lot of people give Dexter Gordon credit for sort of the resurgence of traditional jazz around that time.
Yes.
He is one of the greatest tenor saxophonists that has ever lived.
My favorite, but here's the thing, Dr. Russell was a jazz enthusiast as well.
Okay.
So he and I talked, and I said, you know what, I would really, really love to bring a jazz artist. And so it was really a combination both of his interest and my interest that, a jazz artist would be first on the bill. So did that. I brought, my second event was, my cousin is a classical pianist, Brenda Key. Not sure if you know Wayne Brown, he was at the NEA as director of the music and opera program there for many years, and now is at Michigan Opera and Theater, but it has had a very long and wonderful history of experience in the arts, both he and Brenda. And so Brenda's a fabulous concert pianist. I learned so much from her as not only my cousin, but as a great pianist from her, and many of the piano works that I ended up studying. I learned from her, just from hearing her talk about piano works that she was doing and playing on at concerts. So anyway, brought Brenda, and it was a fabulous concert. And I curated my first exhibition with works from a number of Black artists, many who were in the Virginia area, who were connected to the Virginia area. So I curated my first exhibition there, and I can't remember the fourth event. It was probably a more sort of regional, because I would tend to do sort of national artists and then bring in regional artists. But I say all that because, you know, that Charlton started my interest in arts management. I didn't know the terminology to call that in 1980, 81. And I think back on my piano recitals with Mrs. Phillips in Nashville. And I remember she would always say, you need to go over and practice that Rachmaninoff. And, you know, because I would say, I want to help you when the florist comes to place where the floral arrangement is going to be. And I want to help you set up the chairs. And I want to be there when the caterer comes. I was really interested in all the organization and managing and planning for the recital. I was interested in playing in the recital, but all of this other work was magical to me because we do all of this. And all of a sudden the seats would start filling up with people. It's like, wow, how did they get here?
Right.
You know, we didn't charge any money. All right. So she sent out invitations and I would ask her, can I see the invitation that you sent out? And so I would look. So I didn't think about this until much later, how impactful my career as an arts management educator, how impactful she was in my career, even to this day. And I began in a lot of my classes at the College of Charleston. There probably will be former students of mine listening to this now and will remember my recalling and telling them how I got started, and will remember my telling them I had to direct an artist recital series with no budget, and I had to figure out. And what I did do was I said, well, where's the money in this town? Who's got money? So I went up to the funeral home because I knew the funeral home director. So I was like, okay, well, I know him. And it's a funeral home, so you gotta be able to give me a little bit of money, right? And then there's a car dealership down the street, and I didn't know the owner of that dealership, but I knew somebody who did, and so I went to that person to ask them. That's how I learned to fundraise. So that's really where my career in arts management started. I left. I left St. Paul's. I went home for a year. I went to Nashville for a year. After that 3 years I was like, ooh, mommy, I am exhausted. You know, I've spent my first 3 years, and she was like, girl, you've got many years to go. You better I'll let you stay here for a year, but you better figure out what you're going to do. And so I took a year, and I'm going to call out another childhood friend, Jill Jones, who was at the house, and she said, so what do you want to do? She was working as an advisor in the School of Engineering at the University of Virginia. And I was talking to her, and I said, you know, I'm really interested in that job that I did at St. Paul's that I didn't get paid for, that artist recital series. And if I could do something like that, you know, plan and organize arts events and concerts. And I kind of liked fundraising. And, you know, I had a box office staff that I had to train. And, you know, of course, we did it the old fashioned way, you know, with the cash box.
Right.
And I said, I really like that. She says, you know what? She says, there is a job opening right now at the University of Virginia. It's the director of the African American Cultural Center at the University of Virginia. And I said, let me check into that. Anyway, long story short, applied for and got that job. So I was at the University of Virginia for a while, but I was an arts presenter. I was sort of the campus in, you know, when you've been to the arts presenters conferences, I was sort of the college or campus counterpart to arts presenters. So I did a lot of presenting, both at UVA and in the Charlottesville community. You know, Cool in the Gang. I did a lot of, brought the Broadway touring production of Ain't Misbehavin', A Soldier's Story. just a lot of great stuff. So that kind of propelled me onto a national level as an arts presenter. I did that Arts Presenters Conference for many years. Right. And so I did that for a while, and then decided to go back to school. So, you know, I was an arts presenter there for about 6-7 years. At the time, my mom had passed in 1987, and I was, you know, looking for something else to do, and it was leading me to teaching. And I just didn't, you know, it wasn't music that I wanted to do, because now I had been an arts manager for so many years, and I had been away full time from the music education scene in terms of teaching full time. And I just couldn't figure out what that would be. How do I find a job teaching this arts management thing that I love? Again, not knowing that American University's arts management program was founded back in the late 60s. University of Wisconsin had a program. I just wasn't in that world of arts management education. Decided to go back to school in 1989. Mom passed in 1987, and I think if I had had money, you know, I probably would have just traveled around the world. It was a very devastating time because I'm a daddy and mommy's girl. And so I needed to just kind of really change my whole perspective. And mommy was finishing her dissertation in higher ed. She was actually writing her dissertation. I cannot imagine, on legal pads. And I said, you know what? Let me go back to school. You know, I've always wanted to get a doctorate. And so I went back to New York, but this time to NYU. And I was able to find a program that kind of married my interest in African-American classical music that has stayed with me. My interest in kind of sociology and the arts. I'm real fascinated with the way in which people and institutions work within arts institutions. So that was kind of fascinating to me. And there was a professor there who sort of took me under his wings. And then arts management. So there was no doctoral program in arts management. Remember, I already had a master's. So I took a few courses in Brand Rye's performing arts management program at NYU, calling his name because he's so much an influence even today for me in terms of arts management, along with Valerie Morris, who has been my mentor from day one. And so I go into this program, this doctoral program, Studies in Arts and Humanities. And at the time that I was finishing, Brand Rye was on my dissertation committee, and the other gentleman, Floyd Hammock, who really inspired me in terms of the sociological interests that I had in the arts. And my own chair, dissertation chair, Judy Weissman, who was magnificent over in the Department of Art Education at NYU. And I was talking to Brand after I had was about to finish, and he said, "So what are you going to do?" And I said, "Oh, you know, I'll continue to do arts presenting." And he says, "Huh? You just got a doctorate and you're going to go back in the field? Why don't you teach it?" And I said, "Yeah, I just don't know like how and where I can do that." And he says, "I have a dear friend who founded American University's arts management program. Her name is Valerie Morris." And I said, "I've heard that name," because there were very few, especially females in arts management education, well, arts management and arts management education. And I said, "I've heard that name before." And anyway, he connected me with Valerie. Valerie hired me. And so that was my first job. So this is 1994. That's my first teaching position in arts management education. And I've stayed, and so that's how I got into teaching arts management. And so I was a tenure track professor there, helped her run the master's program, had a lot of master's thesis students, obviously was connected to all things arts in the DMV, and just loved that whole experience. And she, she literally mentored me about this new career of mine, which was teaching what I had been doing all along, even as far back as Jimmy Russell asking me at St. Paul's to direct that artist recital series. So now I'm teaching it.
You said, that there weren't a lot, representation. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, it took me a while to find arts management education. And I think it's an interesting combination. So it's someone who has been the practitioner, so who has planned events and who's fundraised and who's been effective in doing that. But then it's also someone who can teach well. And teaching isn't easy. A lot of people think that they can just walk into a classroom and teach. It is a lot.
Witness.
Yeah, it's a lot. And there is a gift. And I think back on those dolls in my living room, teaching them music theory, and my own mom as an educator. And I think that those are two skill sets that usually are separate for most people. Mm-hmm. So there are not a whole lot of folk. I didn't have, in terms of an African-American female or an African-American mentor, I didn't really have anyone who had done that, who had married both the arts management, the applied practitioner side of arts management with the teaching. There was nobody. So when I came through, now I had Valerie Morris as a white female who was my mentor. And, I grabbed onto her. And the other thing that was happening was now navigating a different academic environment than I had been used to, which is trying to get tenure. So, and what is research in arts management education? And, how does our research how do we get people who are evaluating our research, who are evaluating the research of biologists and sociologists and psychologists, how do we get them to understand what we do in terms of arts management research? So there were sort of these three different sort of areas that were merging for me at the same time. And Valerie was a mentor, but and a great mentor, but I didn't have an African-American mentor at all. I have been the mentor. Definitely. So I connected myself to our association, our national association, the Association of Arts Administration Educators, very, very early on, because but it was really hard to find that group. But now that I was teaching at American University, it was easy because, we were a program that was a part of that network. So now in 1994, I'm connected now to a national, really an international network of people just like me. I didn't know it for a long time, but who are arts management educators who had been on the practitioner end of things and now were teaching, and who were trying to get tenure or had gotten tenure.
So now, I know there's a tremendous difference, but can you explain, I guess, what the difference is from your first, college at this HBCU to, American University?
Very, very different.
Very different.
I see them as two very distinct.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But very important for my growth and development. Mm-hmm. Hampton was nurturing to me. It is a part of my very being.
Like most HBCUs are for people. Same here. Graduating
Same
from
use, South Carolina State. That's right.
Yeah,
It is every breath I take.
Uh-huh.
I breathe Hampton. I breathe Roland Carter. I breathe Willia Daughtry. I breathe Enid Husty. All those professors, and those who were in my major, and those who were part of my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha, where I pledged in 1976. All of that, all of who I am now, it's Hampton and it's Nashville.
Yeah.
And so American University, for a lot of reasons, could not ever be that for me. But American University was so important because that then put me into a whole other world.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of my professional career,
right,
that I had not experienced. So here I'm now able to I'm working with Roland Carter now. He has an institute. Mm-hmm. And I can now bring some of the skills in arts management education that I began learning at American University. I can now bring those skills back to help him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, so for me, it all connects at some point, but the nurturing environment that I had at Hampton, no, I did not have that kind of environment at American University, but I had a hugely important part of my professional career that American University was. I think what did become difficult for me was once I was in arts management education, and connected to, we call it AAAE, the Association of Arts Administration Educators. I was actually myself and one other African-American woman who was teaching at Columbia College in Chicago, but I don't think she was tenure track. We were really the only two in a group of white folk, and primarily white men. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that was, first of all, a new environment for me. Remember, arts management, this is new. So I'm navigating the newness of that. While trying to do this new thing called arts management research. I'm a practitioner. So can arts management research be case studies at, you know, arts institutions in the DC area? If so, I'm good to go. So if I can connect with Woolly Mammoth and some of the other theaters there, you know, and create research based on those arts institutions, okay. So then it was, you know, how rigorous is that kind of research? So there was a lot of newness for me. And then to have to navigate this sea of whiteness at AAAE, right. As I'm trying to not only do my own research, but get tenure. Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
That was a lot. That was a lot. But, and there were so many, in that group. Joan Jeffrey, I remember, was one. Just so many people there who helped me along as a junior faculty member. And the thing is that I was in a very small group of arts management educators in many of these programs across the country who was coming up for tenure in arts management. Many of them who had been with AAAE for as long as they had been, got tenure in their respective arts disciplines. So had I been 15, 20 years, you know, before I came through, I would have gotten tenure in music education.
Right.
So they were getting tenure in theater, in their artistic disciplines. I'm coming along getting tenure in arts management. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of that was new. There was, criteria that we hadn't really thoroughly thought through, and I helped to do that even as I am trying to get tenure. So this is all happening between 1994 and 1998. I left American University in 99. I say 98 because this is what actually brought me here. In 1998, Valerie Morris, my mentor, leaves American University to come and be the dean of the School of the Arts at the College of Charleston.
At the College of Charleston, yeah.
And she calls me and says, I've got a position that's opened as co-director of the Arts Management Program. Would you be interested? I was like, interested in leaving the DC area and coming to South Carolina? No, I wouldn't be interested in doing that.
Right.
No, ma'am.
Right.
So she was like, and she told me a little bit, she teases me about this all the time. But so she talks a little bit about the position, and Stacy Shaw, who was there, this great young, visionary, and I think you guys would really work together well. And I was like, I think I had been to Charleston as a kid. I think our parents brought us to visit, but I just didn't have a South Carolina connection. I had a cousin who lived in Columbia, who was now in Florence, but that was it. She was originally from Raleigh. So I just, finally Valerie talked me into it. I said, okay, I will interview. And so I interviewed. I think I actually even missed the flight, and they had to I was just so not focused on coming here. And so I came. Of course, they brought me during Spoleto.
Oh, yeah.
And during Piccolo, and they gave me a ticket to see the Search for Signs. I can't remember. It's an old Lily Tomlin piece. And it was a Search for Signs. I can't remember it. Search for Signs is a long title. And it was a one-woman show. And on the stage, doing what made me say, hell yeah, I'll come to Charleston, was Joy Vandervoort Cobb.
Yes.
I sat there and watched in the back of Satilli Theater, Joy Vandervoort Cobb put on the most amazing show. I think she must have put on maybe 21 characters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, for all of our viewers out there, could you explain to everyone just really quick who Joy Vandervoort Cobb is?
My dear friend first.
Mm-hmm.
And for many, a nurturer and teacher of humongous proportions of African-American theater at the College of Charleston.
Yes.
But someone who she's doing a lot of voiceover work. She has directed tons of plays, starred in them, off Broadway, all over the country.
Yes.
Still at work. Still at work even in this.
I didn't know that. So Joy kind of sealed it for you.
Yes. So I told Valerie, I said, ooh, I don't know whose idea was it your idea, or at the time it was Michael Hager. Michael gave me the ticket, but I said, y'all really deal, y'all dealt a good card there. So I think Joy, did we meet for lunch? I can't remember if we met for lunch then or when I came back, but my mind was already made up. I said, if Charleston has somebody like this here, yeah, I'm coming. I even bought a house right around the corner from her. So she lives right around the corner. So that's how I got here. So when now it was tough because remember, I'm coming up for tenure at American University.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to need, if I come to Charleston, I'm going to need to start over on the not quite over, because I was able to get some pre-tenure service counted. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's what I did, and that's how I got here.
I get scared sometimes.
But as I always say,
it's okay to be afraid.
As long as you face the fear.
And keep moving forward.
Wherever you are in life, count on the name trusted in insurance for over 70 years. BlueCross BlueShield of South Carolina.